These types of horror stories are always a bit risky, but sharing them with you makes it worth it. I'm curious, where are you watching this from right now? Let me know in the comments below. I've noticed that these kinds of stories hit differently depending on where you are, and they might even make the experience a little creepier. So tell me, are you watching from the safety of your home or from somewhere more eerie? Today's story is a haunted hospital delivery order. It was 10 p.m. Adam, a DoorDash driver, was waiting outside a diner to pick up his last order of the night. When he checked the order details, it seemed odd. Just half a gallon of milk at this hour? But since he needed to complete his earnings for the day, he accepted the order without much thought. When he looked at the address, it pointed toward an abandoned area. That's strange, Adam muttered under his breath. But maybe it was an old man needing milk for the night. Adam turned on his GPS and drove down a dark, deserted road. As he got closer to the destination, the surroundings became eerier. There were no houses, the roads were cracked, and overgrown grass lined the sidewalks. Eventually, his phone indicated that he had arrived, right in front of a dilapidated old building. It was a run-down, abandoned hospital with a rusty sign that faintly read "Hotel" under the dim streetlight. The windows were shattered, and the wind howled through the broken glass, making eerie whistling sounds. Adam nervously checked the delivery instructions. Deliver to the courtyard in the back. Adam got out of his car, holding the milk carton in one hand, and slowly walked toward the back of the building. As he moved, he felt an unsettling sensation, as if someone was watching him from behind a curtain in the broken window. His heart pounded, but he shook off the feeling and kept walking. When he reached the back courtyard, his blood ran cold. There were dark stains on the ground, smeared as if something had been dragged across it. "What the hell is this place?" Adam whispered to himself. Suddenly, his phone buzzed with a new message. "Come inside. Money is on the table." Adam looked up, startled. In front of him was an old rotting door, and to his horror, it was slowly creaking open on its own. Adam's breath hitched. The doorway led to complete darkness, and from inside, he could hear faint whispers. Suddenly, the sound of loud banging came from behind the door. That was it. Adam dropped the milk carton and sprinted back to his car. As he jumped into the driver's seat and started the engine, he glanced at the rearview mirror and froze. A dark figure had just stepped out of the doorway, moving rapidly toward him. "No, this can't be real." Adam slammed his foot on the gas pedal. The figure was gaining on him. But just as he sped past the hospital and reached the main road, the shadowy presence vanished into thin air. The next day, Adam looked up information about the location. What he discovered chilled him to the bone. The hospital had been shut down years ago after a mysterious mass poisoning had killed the entire staff overnight. The poisoning had been traced back to a contaminated carton of milk. Adam's hands trembled as he processed the information. Who or what had placed the order that night? From that day on, Adam vowed never to accept a late-night delivery again. If you ever work as a delivery driver, remember this. Every order has a story, and some stories never end. Next story is The Last Order, a delivery driver's descent into madness. It was 11:45 p.m. The city streets were deserted. Ryan, a food delivery driver, just wanted to complete his last order and head home. When a notification popped up on his phone, he glanced at the details: one burger, one cold drink, and an extra empty plate. An empty plate? Why? Ryan muttered to himself, but shrugged it off and accepted the order. His heart skipped a beat when he saw the address. It was on the outskirts of town, where most of the buildings were old and abandoned. But work was work. He started his motorbike and rode off. As he neared the destination, the atmosphere changed. The streetlights flickered, the air was damp and foul-smelling, and the old buildings lining the road stood eerily silent, as if waiting for something. Finally, he arrived at the given address, a two-story decrepit house with dark, empty windows staring back at him. Ryan knocked. Silence. He knocked again. A few seconds later, the door creaked open slowly, but there was no one there. "Hello? Delivery?" he called out, peering inside. The interior was unsettlingly eerie. Rusted walls, debris scattered across the floor, and an old wooden table with a single lit candle on top. Thinking the customer might be inside, Ryan hesitantly stepped in. As soon as he placed the food on the table, he suddenly felt like someone was standing right behind him. He spun around, but there was no one there. Then, the empty plate on the table started moving on its own. Ryan's breath hitched. The plate stopped, and then a deep, chilling voice whispered, "Sit down. It's time to eat." Ryan's blood ran cold. Where had that voice come from? Suddenly, a figure draped in black robes emerged from the shadows. Its face was hidden in darkness, but its hands reached toward Ryan. "Sit down," the voice boomed, and at that moment, all the doors and windows slammed shut on their own. Ryan turned and ran toward the exit, but as he did, a piercing scream echoed in his ears. "Now, you'll always dine with us?" The next morning, Ryan was nowhere to be found. His phone and motorbike were still parked outside the old house, but he was missing. People searched the house, but there was no trace of him. However, days later, another food delivery driver received an order to the same address: one burger, one cold drink, and two empty plates. Some appetites are never satisfied. Next story is the secret door of the Cornwall Church. This story takes place in 17th century England, in a small village in Cornwall, where Reverend Thomas Griffin served as the local priest. The village was centered around an ancient church, which, according to local legends, had once been a Druidic place of worship. Thomas had been living in the church for several months, but he often felt that something was not right. Every night, when the church bells rang on their own, he would wake up to see shadows moving along the walls. But he always convinced himself that it was just his imagination. One night, while reading through the church's old records, he discovered an ancient blueprint. It mentioned a hidden door in one section of the church, supposedly leading to a forgotten passageway. Thomas thought it was just a myth, but when he ventured into the church basement and ran his hands along the stone wall, he suddenly felt his hand pass through empty space. There really was a secret door. Lighting a lantern, Thomas pushed open the door. A staircase led deep into the darkness. As he descended, strange carvings appeared on the walls. These were unlike any Christian crosses. There were ancient symbols etched into the stone, signs of an older ritual. At the bottom, he found himself in a large stone chamber. In the center stood an old altar, its surface covered in scratches, as if someone had clawed at the stone in desperation. As Thomas stepped closer, whispers rose from the walls. Free us! Free us! A cold sweat ran down his spine. He raised the lantern, and in that dim light, he saw a shadow move, a tall skeletal figure lurking in the darkness. The church bells began to ring. Above him, the church bells suddenly began ringing violently. Thomas turned and ran, but the shadow moved faster than any human could. He raced toward the stairs. But just as he reached for the door handle, he felt something grip his arm. You have opened the door. Now you must pay the price. The next morning, when the villagers arrived for their prayers, they found the basement door wide open. But there was no sign of Thomas. Instead, a new inscription had appeared on the stone altar. Another door has been opened. Some secrets are meant to remain buried. Did you listen to this story in the dark, all alone? Did you hear a strange, unfamiliar sound, or perhaps you felt the whisper of cold breaths? Maybe someone is watching you, too. If you enjoyed this story, then like the video, share your thoughts in the comments. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel. Get ready for the next story. But here's a piece of advice. Next time, don't turn off the lights.